Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good Stuff. As always, excited to be with you today and appreciate you tuning in. When you get a chance, head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe to Good Stuff with Kevin. I know I'm a little biased here, but I got a personal favorite on today's show. He's the CEO of Focus 3, a speaker, writer, coach, and didn't tell him this, but he helps me out as a parent with his method more times than not. But Tim Kight, Tim, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be with you today.
Well, as I told you a little bit, it's going to be difficult for me not to want to talk to you here for a couple hours, but I'm going to do my best to keep it down for you. How about just right off the bat? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know who you are, but maybe for those that don't, let's just dive into Focus 3 right away. What is that specifically, and what do you do through that?
Yeah, our firm, Focus 3, we train in three things: leadership, culture, and behavior. That's the name 3. And most importantly, we help our organizational and athletic clients integrate those three disciplines to produce next level results. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we're working on a new leadership workbook today. This morning we're finishing up some of the content around that and doing some editing. And there's this statement that everything that happens in an organization or on a team depends on the effectiveness of leaders, the power of culture, and the behavior of people. And so that's what we specialize in.
Well, I find it really difficult, at least maybe it's the way I'm made up, that people would not agree with all of this and buy into it. I mean, E plus R equals O. Not that that's your snart, but maybe that's your signature right now. It's absolutely amazing to me. And like I said, I use it. We have 3 boys, 13, 11, and 4, and I use it with them a lot. It's in our office. It's on their whiteboards, even at home. Just explain to our viewers a little bit about that and maybe how you came up with it or the creation of it.
I'll go back though, Kevin, when you talked about maybe you're biased, but who wouldn't agree with the importance of leadership, culture, and behavior. I think part of the problem is everyone does agree that those 3 disciplines are necessary, but just because you agree on the concept doesn't mean that you agree on the discipline methodology or the system to have effectiveness in all 3 of those areas. So everybody, and I'm going to use this word, people dabble in leadership training, people dabble in culture, and people dabble in behavior, or they have a program, or they have an initiative, or have a book that they read, or for 2 years they tried this training program, but they don't have a focused, long-term, systematic, rigorous approach to building leadership according to a agreed upon framework and system, and then hold people to it. Because you don't build skill because you go to a workshop. You don't build skill because you read a book. You don't build skill because you listen to a podcast. You build skill because you go do something. You go to the class to learn and get awareness of what dynamics or standards or principles you should, but you got to go practice. It's like basketball. You coach basketball. If I was on your team, you'd have a chalk talk, right? We're in a room, right. But how would you coach me to get better at basketball? Talk a little bit in the room, and then what? We go on the court. What I got to do.
Right.
That's the missing piece in leadership, culture, behavior is the simple system, and then the rigorous doing, and then the accurate feedback, and then the reps. That's the problem in all those areas. So I agree. People think and believe and do stuff around leadership, culture, and behavior, but I'm not sure they have systems that they execute with repetitive excellence to produce next level skill.
Yeah, for sure. It makes total sense. And I guess with everything going on like today in general, whether it's the riots, COVID, and I don't, the E plus R equals O is a great example of that. But how do we change our, I would say, natural unhealthy responses we have in most conflict or stressful events or situations?
Yeah, great question. And obviously it's one that is being asked a great deal with the COVID crisis and now all the various social conflict and obviously the riots and so forth. But backing up for a second, and you mentioned E plus R equals O, that's our system for behavior skill. That's the system that we use to help people be very intentional about how they choose to respond to the outcomes they're trying to produce and the events that they're dealing with. And of course, it stands for event plus response equals outcome.
Thank you.
But here's why it's effective, and here's the answer to your question. The reason why anybody reacts poorly to life situations is because, one, we're not thinking clearly. We don't see the situation with clarity. Or two, we're not in an emotional state to act wisely and effectively. And so what we've recognized, what we've done around E plus R equals O is we've built into it a process to build initially three skills. Number one is the skill of clarity. Number two is a skill of emotional discipline. Number three is the skill of disciplined action. We call it press pause, get your mind right, step up. Mm-hmm. And you watch people acting out, whether it's an argument you get with a friend that you don't need to have, or whatever you see going on today, when people behave ineffectively, were they thinking clearly? No. Right. Were they hijacked by their emotions? Yes. Yeah. If they'd have stopped and you said, wait a second, if you do that, what do you think the outcome would be? And they'll shout, oh, it get more. Hold on. No. Really, seriously. If you engage in that action, what outcome do you think would be produced if you did that? And just slow down, take a breath, think this thing through. Well, they're not doing that.
Yeah, right.
And they haven't been trained to do that. And that's why E plus R equals O provides a system, a framework, and then the skills that we teach provide the actual competency to execute something more intentional and meaningful and productive in the way we act. One last thought, and I've always said this, I think the great test in mental toughness is when the defining moment is when how you feel doesn't align with what you need to do. Because emotion is an extremely strong influencer and motivator of human behavior. And if you can't step away from your emotion and look at yourself and say, wow, that emotion is not taking me in the right direction. I say this all the time, that in order to make good decisions, you need good information. And sometimes your emotions give you bad information.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, you mentioned some behavior and skills and training, and I know there's some learning, and a great quote I want to get to that I've heard you say, but what's the difference on training, maybe behavior versus the skills?
Not a lot, honestly. I mean, we know that learning and skill building, whether it's emotional skill building or technical skill building, or even language or verbal, that skill building happens when, number one, effective skill building happens when, number one, you believe, you have the right mindset that you can build skill through focused effort. So belief is step number one. Mindset, step number one.
Yeah.
You have to have the mindset in order to be an effective learner. And if you believe that repetition and hard work won't build skill, you're not going to put in the effort and the work. If you believe it will build skill, then you're going to be fully mentally engaged in the process. So number one is you have to have the right mindset, whether you're building a technical competency or a behavior competency. Number two, you got to do reps. Mm-hmm. It's repetition. The number one most effective technique or tactic for skill building at all levels and all stages is focused repetition over time. Yeah. It's actually called, we say it this way, it's the cumulative impact of daily behavior repeated over time.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, the aggregation of marginal gains. And I have this really important point to make to people. It's slow, it's small, and it's daily. It's slow steps, it's small improvements, and it's daily repetition. And if you're not willing to engage in the slow, small, daily, and not be discouraged by the absence of immediate results, because it doesn't happen fast. In fact, results at first are invisible. So whether I'm learning French, or I'm learning to play the guitar, or I'm learning to manage my emotions, or I'm learning to shoot a 3-point shot, or be middle linebacker, or what is it? It's right mindset, and then again reps. Third piece is embrace the mistakes. Mm-hmm. You're going to use mistakes as feedback. And then fourthly, be coachable. There's limits to how much you can observe your own behavior. So think about the power of mindset, repetitive behavior, making and learning from mistakes, and being coachable. What could you learn technically or behaviorally if you integrated those 4 disciplines into your life?
Yeah, it's endless. And you bring me back to coaching, Tim. Like the coachable thing, I've tried to tell my boys, it's like the ones that were the most coachable were the ones that shockingly got better. And the reps thing, hey, do you feel it's easy to do this on the days you feel like it? On the days that you're not feeling like, are you pushing through? Are you resilient? And for basketball, for example, are you willing to take 10,000 shots maybe just to make one? And doing that work in the dark when nobody's around. And I love. You said one time, if you eliminate discomfort, you remove learning, which, can I get an amen for that? I mean, that's great. And I think this goes in reference to the edge that you've spoken about too. Can you dive into that just a little bit more for us, please?
Yeah, the edge is great. I love that. I love that you picked up on that statement that we make, and that's really out of neuroscience, Kevin. The statement that if you avoid discomfort, if you eliminate discomfort, you remove the learning process. The human brain, the human body needs to be uncomfortable to grow. You need to push the brain to build new neural networks. You have to, because that's how the brain builds skill. And the term in neuroscience is fire and wire. So the brain works with the way the brain communicates and functions. It works according to neural networks. And so just going to be on YouTube, when people can see this is a visual they can see. Yeah. So if my hand is a brain cell, and my fingers are what are called dendrites, and those are connections that come out of the brain cell. So here's two cells not connected. Now, for me to speak French or to shoot accurate 3-point shots or to be a great boundary safety or to have emotional management, I have to have a certain neural network. Well, I don't have the network yet. So how do I build it? Well, I have to keep doing the reps. It's called fire and wire. So the more I do it, the more I bring those cells together, and eventually I connect those dendrites through something called synapses. But that process is uncomfortable. Yeah. Why? Because it doesn't exist yet. Or the neural network exists in the brain, but it's weak. And so it prefers existing comfortable networks rather than a network. So the discomfort that someone feels is actually real. It's not a psychological phenomenon. It's physiological and psychological. It's that those brain cells trying to connect, but they don't. And the brain says, we've got some comfortable connections. Yeah. Let's go to the comfortable ones. So here's what people do at the edge. And the edge is where life challenges you to get better at something you're not good at or good enough at. It can be something personal, it can be something professional, but it's really interesting. The edge marks a place where you need to get better and can get better, but it's really hard. It's difficult. It's uncomfortable. It's this, right? So what does a disciplined person do? Takes mindset, takes repetition, takes making mistakes, takes embracing discomfort, takes some coachability, and does the work. Until what? Connection, fire and wire. And then get that neural pathway strong, and now it becomes a competency or a skill. That's the edge.
I love it. And let's touch on it before I forget, kind of, just because I love this part about the focus goes, the energy flows, but just within that, you've talked about that 15-70-15 philosophy, with the resistors, the followers, everything in there from even the early adapters. Let our people know that's listening to that, how that comes into play with all of this.
It's actually, Urban talks about 10-80-10. I know 15-75-15, same thing. You can chop up the math anyway. Let me reframe it slightly. Let me talk about 4 levels of 4 kinds of people in an organization: the cynical, the compliant, the committed, and the compelled. The cynical, the compliant, the committed, and the compelled. Can you see that in your head?
Yeah, for sure.
So your bottom 10%, that's the cynical. Those are the people who are negative. I say they're the people who have quit but haven't left.
Yes.
They're energy vampires. They're obviously negative, and they're recruiters. Yeah, they try to recruit other people, and they don't put effort into things. They're critical, and they're undermining culture. They're undermining strategy. They're undermining teaming. They're not a good impact in the organization. Then the next level would be what I call the compliant. And those are people just checking the box. They're doing a little bit more work than the cynical, but they're just getting by. And the thing about the compliant is they're very susceptible to the gravitational pull and influence of the cynical. So the cynical are verbal. They say, come on down here. You're not negative enough yet. Come on down here. Be cynical with us. Then the third level are your good workers. Those are the committed people. Those are the ones who are saying, I like this job. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to finish what's asked of me. I'm going to have a positive mindset, and I'm pretty productive person, and I'll take as many of those as I can get. But there's a 4th level. The 4th level is what I call the compelled. And those are the people who, and here's the difference between committed and compelled. When the committed people get to the edge, they stop pushing. When the good people, when the committed people experience discomfort, they say, I don't know if I want to go there or not.
Yeah, right.
And that's hard. So they're good, they're committed, but they're not compelled. So they don't get a breakthrough at the edge. They don't go to the next level. The compelled love the edge. The compelled love the discomfort. They love the new thing. The compelled say, I just do not want to be the same guy today I was a month ago. I don't want to be the same woman today that I was a month ago. I want to be better. I refuse to get stuck at an old level of skill when there's another level available to me. And I understand discomfort is a bridge I need to go over. So I'm going to cross it. That's the compelled. And what's interesting, the compelled and the cynical are both verbal. The compelled are verbal to pull people up. The cynical are compelled are verbal to pull people down. And they're all battling for those folks in between.
So if I'm understanding, and let's use me if I'm wrong.
Is that picture clear?
It does, and I just want to clear it up maybe for somebody that's listening. If I'm wrong, you tell me so that way they feel more comfortable. But if I'm a coach and I've got this 10-80-10, and it's really hard, I'll admit, to not focus on the bottom 10 because I'm going into the gym with 12 guys and 2 of them are mad because they're not playing, right? But they're really focused on that and they're drawing people there, and they take away what should be the people that deserve everything on my. So it's like I need to focus on the 10 at the top, the compelled, to bring up the 80, because if I'm focused on the cynical, it's more likely that maybe they're going to come down. Would you say that's accurate?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. I would focus all my energy on the compelled and the committed, on the 10, and then the top, the higher level of the 80. And those are the people and then teach them how to lead others.
Right.
And it's one of the things Urban was so good at when he was coaching football, was he would take the top 10% and teach them, require them to bring others with them out of the 80% and bring them into that top 10%. And his observation is the more successful he was at doing that, and the more successful those players were at doing that, that the more of the higher percentage of people were in the top 10%. And his championship teams all had a preponderance of compelled players on it.
Right. Well, and I'm sure they held each other accountable.
That's the point. That's the whole point.
Environment, and he didn't have to, right? Yeah.
That's the whole point. Yeah. And then the thing is, the players marginalize the bottom 10.
Right. Right.
But having said that, and if you've got coaches or particularly young athletes listening to this podcast, one of the biggest challenges right now, and this is in pro and college and in high school, is athletes are afraid to hold their friends accountable on a team. They would rather the culture suffers than to put stress on a relationship.
Yeah. Why is that? I mean, and we even need to focus on business, because business leaders are listening too, and I see that existing. Yeah. Right. So what would you say you see that causes that?
Couple things. Number one is a lack of mental toughness. It's embracing productive discomfort. It's uncomfortable to have a difficult conversation. But I tweeted out yesterday, 2 days ago, the very tweet is, if you're a leader and you avoid that discomfort, then you're avoiding leadership.
That's right.
Don't flinch. Have the conversation. And I call difficult conversation, the discomfort is a catalyst to change something.
Yes.
The discomfort's valuable. The reason you should have the conversation is because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, right.
It shouldn't be the motivator to avoid it. It should be the motivator to have it.
Yeah.
And does it make the conversation? Of course it makes it difficult. Of course it does. There's emotion involved. Yeah, it's involved. But people avoid it because they're not courageous. They avoid it because they're not mentally tough. They avoid it because they're not compelled enough to have. That's number one. Number two is the fear of a broken relationship, and that is the fear of not belonging. The number one human fear is the fear of not belonging. They say that public speaking is the number one fear. People fear it greater than death. It's really not fear of public speaking. It's the fear of being rejected. It's the fear of getting in front of a group, talking, and then not being liked or cared about or accepted. So the fear of not being accepted is a massive human fear. We want to belong, and we'll compromise even our own values sometimes to belong and get along with people. So,
and I don't, if you don't mind me interjecting, Tim, please.
Sure.
I really feel like because I think a confrontation, when you talk about this, and that word scares a lot of people, but I think if you're willing to have the conversation you're referring to, it doesn't mean it's going to work and eliminate whatever the issue was, but at least it gives you a higher percentage, rather than when you don't have it at all, isn't it building? Isn't it growing? Because you're just,
Always.
yeah.
Actually, here's what I've learned. If you ignore problems, they'll get better over time if you ignore them. Right? Yeah, no, not at all. In fact, as we say, problems never age well. And here's another misnomer, Kevin. I think those listening maybe can get some benefit from this. Don't view a difficult conversation as one conversation. View it as a process.
Mm-hmm.
I think we put a lot of fear into, if I go talk to Kevin and he gets upset, that's going to be really uncomfortable. The way I think of it is, all right, I probably have to have 7 conversations before the needle's going to move. So I better go have the first one. And also, I'll do this a lot when I have it. I'll talk with someone and I'll even say this, I'm not that good at difficult conversations. I'm not. I mean, there's probably people better at it. And it's probably going to be uncomfortable, awkward for you and for me. But here's what I've learned. You have to have them. So whether I'm skillful or not, here we go. And I'm going to share with you what I've observed, what I think. And I want to hear back from you what you think. But we're going to have a conversation. And then we'll think about it and go away. And we'll come back later and have conversation number 2. You like to engage in the process. That's what I do. I don't view it as like a single transactional conversation. It's not.
Yeah.
Not. In fact, pretty good chance if it's a difficult situation with an emotional person, the first conversation isn't going to go real well. I'm not worried about the first one.
Yeah, right.
I want to be committed to the next 3, 4, 5 of them I'm going to have. It's just how it's a process. Embracing as such.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you bring up 2 things that are great in leadership to me is you're being vulnerable, right? And you're also being authentic to them. And I think people will appreciate and respect that over time. So that's really
Absolutely.
Helpful. Yeah. Speaking of leaders, and of course, you just mentioned Urban Meyer. I know you're around him a ton. I absolutely love the podcast. I hope if people aren't listening, I highly suggest I know I've passed it on to a bunch of people. What makes him special as leader, if you want to zone in on him or, anybody else in general? Is there 1 or 2 things that you've seen over time, Tim, that this just sticks out for these people in general? These are separators for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's characteristics. We're redoing our leadership workbook right now, and that's literally what the leadership workbook is about, is what are the non-negotiable fundamental disciplines of exceptional leadership. And pretty good chance we're going to call that. It's currently called Lead Now. I think we're going to change the name to the Pillars of Leadership. What are those pillars? So number 1, I would say, in order, but one of the characteristics that makes Urban effective and any leader effective is belief from the heart rather than from the head. And he and I talk about this all the time, where you have to have a heart belief, not just a concept in the head about the culture that you want and the kind of program that you want, the kind of organization team that you want, because what comes from the heart touches the heart. And there's a profound difference between a concept in your head and a belief in your heart. And in players or employees, associates can tell if you believe what you're saying. And so a leader who says, here's the kind of culture I want, and then communicates that culture from the heart is very different than a leader who borrows something from Disney or Southwest Airlines or a book that they read or a seminar they went to or a clinic that they attended. And you could tell that it sounded good to them. And so they put it in PowerPoint. No, it's got to come from the heart. So leaders who know who they are and know what kind of culture they want, and they immediately begin to communicate and build that culture, are going to be more effective than those who are sort of borrowing someone else's power statements, if you will. So I think that's one of the characteristics of Urban and other leaders that I've met. Then the second is they're fiercely competitive. They want to win, fiercely competitive. But, and here's the thing, it's not about self, it's about the team. It's not about self, it's about the team. And I call that the difference between a big ego and a strong ego. A big ego is self-oriented. A strong ego is team-oriented. A big ego wants to be in control. A strong ego wants to serve and support and coach and mentor. And you got to have a strong ego to compete and win, but not a big one. And there's a difference. And a strong ego is willing to subordinate. Like I met with Urban, we've been working on some projects together that should be coming out soon. And we've been meeting every day for the last 3 or 4 days. And he mentioned again, we're sitting around his outside and the table on the deck, and he just leans in and goes, I just love learning. I just love finding those areas where I just need, and here he is retired from coaching football, doing Fox football and some other stuff with some other people, doing some corporate speaking, and then these projects we're working on. And he wants to be better, and he wants to make other people better. And so that's I think a massively important competency for the desire, the passion to be better is a superpower.
Yeah.
So those are just a few things that I would share.
I'd be curious to know what you think of this, not to get off track with something I didn't have, but do you think there's a difference between somebody that loves to win versus somebody that hates to lose?
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Have you talked to my son Brian about that?
I haven't, but I can sense it, and for me, it's a huge difference who I'm allowing in my foxhole. If you love to win, I don't have anything against it. Excuse me, but if you hate to lose, I'm all about it.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting way. I had not anticipated that's the direction that you would go, because I think so those are words, and those words represent a mindset. And I know Brian has done a lot of work around this, and I think he's very articulate about the philosophy and the psychology of this. But and I'll bring Urban up, and so people who are here. How about this? A culture of fear versus a culture of achievement, or culture of belief.
This is good. Yeah. Right.
I believe I've seen this. An athlete motivated to achieve and who believes will always beat the athlete who's motivated to avoid punishment and who's afraid.
True. So
And
you
I've
would say
seen
the hate to losing is more of that fear based. Yeah. I get that.
And it's not just, and it's like fear of losing. Like if you're afraid of losing, you're going to have to fix that. Now, Urban will tell you, and we talk about this. He's spoken about this on a podcast. He's going to talk about it more in the future. It's one of the things that's caused him stress is his fear of losing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you start playing not to lose, that's a different game than when you're playing to win.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now you don't want to make dumb mistakes, but I'll tell you who was the best at this was John Wooden, my mentor at UCLA. He wasn't afraid of losing.
Yeah, right.
He wasn't. All he wanted to do was the pursuit of winning, and it wasn't even winning the game. I mean, Urban has really evolved in this. Don't win the game, win the moments in the game. Yeah. Forget the game, be in the moment. If you win the moments, the game takes care of itself. But if you're afraid of losing the game, what'll happen? You'll lose focus on the moment.
Yeah.
There you go. The ball's coming down. One player says, "Oh my gosh, if I miss that ball, my coach is going to yell at me, and my dad's going to be mad at me, and they're going to say bad things about. Oh my gosh." Player number 2, ball's coming out. That's mine. That belongs to me. See the point of the ball. Catch the point. That's mine, baby. That belongs to me. Who's going to win between those two players? The fear guy or the belief guy? Does that make sense?
It makes great sense, and it's something that I appreciate you bringing up, because that's going to be a self-reflection. I'm going at it more from the competitive standpoint probably than I am what you're explaining, so I appreciate that. That's good. It's
well,
good.
I still think it's competitive. So if I drop the ball, and if I'm the belief guy and I drop the ball, what's my mindset?
Yeah, I'm worried probably that something bad's going to happen. Or
no, I'm the belief guy, and I drop the ball.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah.
I'm the belief guy, and I drop it. What's my mindset? Okay, I didn't execute well, and I believe that more reps, more practice, more film, more study, I'll correct the mistake, and I will not drop the next one. And I go back to work.
Yeah, that's
good. It's like this: you can protect your ego, or you can get better. You can't do both. The guy who's afraid of losing is protecting his ego. Take ego out of it. Eliminate that as a factor.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense, Kevin.
It does make sense. Yeah. I love being called out, so that's good for me too. You know, I can think about all those things you just said. I'd be interested to know what you think on how important. I've never really asked anybody this, Tim, but I just went to hear. How important do you feel like my private life is, and the impact of the people I'm leading at work? Like, I think a lot of people would want to know that. You know, whether it's something that happens at home as a parent, as a spouse, or do you see that as something, or not at all?
Well, what happens at home affects what happens at work, and vice versa. It just you can't live a bifurcated life or a compartmentalized life where if things are disruptive at home, you're going to be very, very challenged. It'd be almost difficult to be consistently excellent on the job. If things aren't going well on the job, it's going to be very difficult to be effective at home. And so and this is why I love teaching E plus R equals O, Kevin. That applies equally at home as it does at work. And it's my task to manage my R factor, my response at home as well as at work. I ask this all the time to people in our corporate workshops. I ask them, where do you tend to manage your R factor better? E plus R equals O.
Great.
Where do you tend to do that better, at work or at home? And I've asked that all over the world. It doesn't matter whether it's Boston, Buenos Aires, Brussels, or Beijing. I've asked it in every sector. It's a business environment. And I ask them, where do you tend to be more effective in managing your response, at work or at home? What do you think people tell me? 90% of people.
I would think they say work.
That's right, it's work. And I ask them, why do you do that? And it gets real quiet. Like, why do you give your family R factor leftovers? And it's sitting quiet. And among the answers we end up identifying is that number one is energy, where you put a hard days in at work, you go home and you're tired, right? And you're tired, your spouse is tired, and that's number one. Number two is that we have no system for it. We don't have a system for work behavior and for home behavior. And this is where E plus R equals O comes in. So if you adopt E plus R equals O and you use the disciplines we teach you, so before you go into work every day, you press pause for clarity, you get your mind right, positive energy, you step up to the moments and you respond with discipline to the situations at work. When you go home, same thing. What? You press pause for clarity, you get your mind right for energy at home, and you step up and respond to the events that happen at home. So it's a trained skill. It's a system with trained skills. And that's why I think it's, without it, I would shudder to think what I would do in my life if I didn't have E plus R equals O in my life. Now so that home and work, yes, strong relationship.
Yeah, that's good. Now you speak to obviously maybe kids or students and coaches and leaders and all kinds of different age groups. Do you feel like do you have one universal message to any age group? I mean, is it the E plus R equals O, or is there something else that you would hone in on across the board?
Well, that's one of them. You actually mentioned at least two of my core messages, whether it's a class of fifth graders, the class of high school seniors, college athletes, corporate executives, sales folks. One would be E plus R equals O, and one would be the edge.
Yeah.
Because those two, and there's others that are universal, but those two are cornerstone. Because if you sell for a living, you lead for a living, you team for a living. If you compete on the field of the court or the pool or the mat, or you're in a classroom, you better manage the R factor and you better be good at the edge. Period. No matter where you are, no matter what you do. And so those would be two absolutely essential messages that I would communicate on a regular basis to those various groups.
And when you're going into a lot of these places, I know everybody's concerned with culture. What are the best cultures? What exists in them across the board? Are you seeing some separators there, like we talked about with leadership? Is there one or two things that stick out to you?
Yeah, you mean what corporate cultures or organizational cultures are most effective and healthy?
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. One would be they're crystal clear. They're written down, they're crystal clear. Number two, they're behavioral, not just conceptual. So there's behavioral standards. Number three, leadership communicates the culture and lives the culture. There's consistency between leadership and what leadership says, what leadership does. Okay. They hire for the culture. They promote for the culture. And they hold people accountable to the culture. They do not allow behavior inconsistent with that culture, that they take it seriously in everything that they do. And then the final one was they tie culture to strategy. They make sure that culture initiates behavior that's strategically necessary. So the strategy and culture aren't these separate things. So you think of Southwest Airlines, Disney properties, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, USAA Insurance. There's a handful of them out there. That's how they operate.
That's great. Hey, before we kind of go with a finish here, I'd be curious to know, I always like hearing about, and I guess it's a little personal, but I just love hearing about daily routines or habits. Is there any that you have that you'd love to share with our people that help you in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked this before, and I think it's a great question. I think you need to have an early morning quiet time habit, a morning
Mhm.
of step back, get away, and be reflective. For me, it's a combination of Bible study, Bible reading, prayer, and then writing. So every morning when I get up, first thing I do is read the Bible, and take some, actually write a devotional. So I not only read the Bible, but I make some commentary on it and publish my devotional. And then I just write on my, whether it's, leadership or competitiveness or mental things. So
Mhm.
I think that's really important. I think daily exercise, physical exercise, becomes critical important. Um, Typically for me, if I don't get the exercise in the morning, it's a bit tougher to get it in during the day. About half the time when I say I'm not going to work out this morning, I'll get it in the afternoon. I don't.
Mhm.
Half the time I do. Half the time I don't. So morning is pretty important, I think, to get in some physical exercise as well. But so for my morning routine, quiet time, reflection, some kind of writing, and then some kind of physical exercise, I think is critically important. Now, I also have a statement that I make to myself every morning about the way I want to live my day. And here's what I say to myself. This is my self-talk. Today, I get to lead with purpose, serve people, solve problems, and bring energy. Can't wait to get my day going. Not I have to. Today, I get to lead
Get
with
to.
purpose, serve people, solve problems, and bring energy. I'm gonna go be that guy. Off I go.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. What about you personally then, in terms of growing, in terms of learning, getting better? What are some things that you're doing? You're a reader, you're a podcast guy, you're meeting with people, combination of all maybe, or some others?
Yes, I'm a voracious reader. I listen to a ton of podcasts when I can, and a lot of comment. So reading and observing is. I mean, I probably read somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 books a month. That's my guess, maybe more. Um, I'm a huge user of some of these summaries, like if Blinkist. If you've not discovered that, that's a great.
Mhm.
It's a great app to use. But I consume as much as I possibly can when it comes to reading and studying.
That's great. Well, hey, we're going to go in the backyard here and shoot some threes. I'm going to dish it off to you here for 3 pointers to finish. All right. So,
Okay, good.
number one, if people could maybe learn one thing from this talk, what would you want that to be? What would you want them to grab hold on to?
Um, be relentless at the edge. When life gets hard, when life gets difficult, be relentless. Just literally don't quit. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you are relentless. And I say relentless, I mean literally
Hmm.
don't stop. If you make mistakes, keep going. If it gets uncomfortable, keep going. People criticize you, keep going. It's not the decision to start that matters. It's the many decisions to continue. The one that starts easy. It's the don't listen to the quitting voice
Yeah.
is my message on that one.
That's great. If you could step into my shoes here, what would have you asked of yourself that I did not ask today?
Wow, I would have asked, what's the biggest hardship you've had to overcome?
Hmm. You care to share?
I have cancer. I was diagnosed in March with stage 4 cancer. So I've got it's metastasized. And
Yeah.
what's really cool about that, I mean, yeah, it's a challenge, but at the same time, I'm trained for it. I mean, it's when E plus R equals O gets
Hmm.
very real. When you sit down at the doctor's office and your physician says the tests have come back and you have stage 4 metastasized cancer and it's not curable. In the middle of COVID, it's
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
whoa, right?
Right.
So I thought about it. He told me that, I'd done all the tests and all that stuff. And I smiled
Hmm.
because my faith, my, my realization that I was chosen and that I'm equipped and let's go.
Yeah.
That's my E. Let's go. Let's do this. And I actually just had a walk with him yesterday. I'm on chemo. I'm doing all that, doing pretty well actually. I feel great.
Yeah. Good.
The treatments are going fantastic, and I don't know what the long term thing is going to be over the years, but right now my numbers are going down. I mean, I'm thrilled with what's happening. But at the same time, I'm in a battle with incurable cancer. So
Yeah.
we went walking yesterday, and we're just talking about mindset and attitude. And he said, that's at least half the battle with this thing. So I would say, I've got 4 grandkids.
Yeah.
Two are under the age of 1, and I want to be around for their high school years. So my biggest challenge, my biggest obstacle that I've ever had in my life, I'm in it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm winning because I trust in the Lord, and I trust in my skills and my training.
Yeah, that's well, it's a great question.
I didn't mean to get so profound.
No,
Sorry
well,
about that, but
I
you
appreciate
asked,
you
and
sharing.
so yeah.
No, I appreciate you being vulnerable with that and sharing that with us, and just know that you're definitely in thoughts and prayers there. Last thing is, I call this good stuff. I just think people need more of it. However you define that yourself, but what's some good stuff that you can give us in closing, whether it's relative to what's going on now or just in general, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with my medical diagnosis. The best stuff in life are good people in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, I got back from that walk with my doctor. One of I call it walk with the doc. I mean, we didn't talk medicine. We talked life and strategy and our kids and my grandkids. And I've got such great friends. I got friends in sports. I got friends in business. I've got the best wife in the world. I got the best kids in the world. And my grandchildren are absolutely the best grandkids in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
But the people in my life, it just, and it doesn't mean that we all agree all the time either, right? I mean, but everybody loves each other, they respect each other. And this is the thing that breaks my heart about where we're at right now as a society. Let's sit down and talk about this stuff. And we don't agree necessarily, but let's agree to get involved and share our real feelings and solve that stuff. But I love the people in my life. I love who the Lord's brought into my life. And that's the good stuff in my life, man, is the people that I got.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hey, Tim, there's a couple of different ways I think people could be connected to you. Like you said, whether it's something you're sending out, social media, podcasts. Do you mind just sharing what those avenues are so people can do that?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and at Timothy Kight, Kight. Would love to have you follow on Twitter. I post on LinkedIn every day also. Same thing, Timothy Kight. Our website is focus3.com. And I think you'd find that to be we're redoing some stuff there. It's really cool. And our podcasts are called the Focus 3 Podcast, and it's on all the platforms, Twitter, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, all those places. And love to have people follow on the and if people like a devotional, if they happen to be, not everybody reads the Bible or wants to, but those who do, my devotional website is acalltoexcellence.com. It's acalltoexcellence.com. And it's a verse by verse study of some book of the Bible. We happen to be going through the book of Proverbs right now. We've done a bunch of different ones, and I go slowly, real slow, verse by verse. We've been Proverbs for 2.5 years. So we're chapter 29 right now, but it's a good devotional.
Yeah, good. Well, I know about all those other ones. I didn't know about that. And I just, the month of May, with those 31 days, I took our 13-year-old through the Proverbs, one chapter every day. And I love it. I wish somebody would have done it with me, and there's nothing better. But, well, hey, Tim, I know, I know you're busy and you have other things going on. So I really appreciate you. I'm very grateful that you took the time to do this. I know you talk about elite a lot, and I think you're elite, and I love everything about this. And I wish you nothing but the best moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks. And I think everybody that's listening, kind of as we talk about this at the end, what can you grab hold of today and make it applicable in your life? As I told you before, I know I'm very biased to this message, but I think it's as good as any. So I look forward to hearing what you think of what Tim talked about today and how it's impacted your life. Until next time, good stuff.